I'm going to tell you a story about a ship that was lost long ago and how we used numerical logic and a bit of APL to find it. It is a quite an interesting case of real world. I tried to explain to one of the Italian girls about how to learn APL, that you need to, or if you can find something around you onto which you can apply code, define your problem from your close surrounding. It's much more interesting than actually listening to people telling how great APL is and how setting up cases for you. Grab a known problem, I did, and see what you can do. In Florida, I started by saying, well, let's move a little short while back in time. This time, we will only move a tiny, minor time step back. 50 years ago. 50 years ago, there was a ship, MS Irma, that disappeared in a storm in autumn. It was rather dramatic because there were lots of searches and lots of media attention. And as it wasn't found, it grew into a bigger story. And eventually it turned out into one of the biggest mysteries in Finnish maritime history. It's not a great, big boat. It's not any of the smallest either. For those times, it was rather big. But it was in 1968. 46 meters, almost 8 meters wide, dead weight tonnage, pretty much. By the way, the DWT is not the weight, it's not the mass, it's a volume measurement. You can Google it, check up in Wikipedia. Two guys became interested a little bit over a year ago. This is my good friend Mikael. He's a film producer and otherwise a curious guy. And we started to think about the Irma story as it was 50 years. It's a good time to take it up and see what we can do. Additionally, the owners of the Irma happened to be the family nearby my summertime place, which is at the end of the arrow. I think it's only 1,600 meters between their place and our place. So it seems natural. It was a story for the entire city. I mean, it's a very emotional story, has been alive in this area of Finland for a long time. Ship was owned by a guy, Arthur Grönqvist, who is dead, of course, already. He's in court here after the accident. On board the ship were 11 persons, 4 of his sons. He had 7 sons, all pretty young. 3 of them had wives, also young girls, young women. And the captain and one of the women had a small kid on board, 2 years old boy. 3 crew members, also young persons, 11 in total. This kind of people, 20 plus strength, lots of courage. Nothing is impossible. It's a go, we do it like we were when we were at that age. This guy here is the youngest one. I think that he is particularly kind of disturbing, 60 years old only. And he joined that ship only 1 month before the Irma accident and before he lost his life. Just thinking of my own son, they seem so invincible, these young boys, teenage boys, as they grow up. But eventually they are They are not. They just look so. Let's go and see what happened. Irma leaves Klaipėda. There will be a movie production. Here's a short cut of that movie. Yeah, I said I called my friend Mikael yesterday and say I need a clip of this. There will be a documentary next year, at least in Finland, maybe in Scandinavia, about the Irma story. And I said I want this one with this women singing because it's such a nice background music. Intention: go from Klaipėda in Lithuania. It was Soviet Union at those times. Straight up close to the Swedish coast and to Finland, to Rauma. Nothing strange in that at all. They left on Thursday and should be there on Saturday morning. They've done the trip many, many times before. Speed 10.5 knots. At Svenska Björn, that's a very well-known lighthouse outside Stockholm. I mean, this is what we need, what we know. We have very little information to start with. But radio call from Irma, 8:35 near Svenska Björn. Nothing odd with that. 17:46 near Lågskär, another well-known place. That is strange because it should take only 2 hours to go that segment, and it takes 9 hours. Very odd. 1848, at height of Understen. Understen in Swedish is Märket. Another very well, maybe the most known navigation route place between Finland and Sweden. That's also odd. It took only 1 hour. It should take almost 4 hours to get there. Additionally, we got later on we heard that a ship has observed Irma outside Stockholm at the afternoon. In the court protocol, it was said that at midnight a trawler observes Irma not moving and no sign of life on board. Additionally, we got the last one. Last protocol observation a bit after midnight. The fisherman sees white light going north while he himself is going to safe harbor where he lives at the Åland Island. This is the Åland Islands here between Finland and Sweden. Additionally, when doing our investigations, we have found a logbook entry from a towboat from this place, where it's written that there were Swedish-talking boys asking, do you have any long bolts? And this is quite messy. This is what we have to find the ship that was lost long ago. The details don't match. Our conclusion is that may have made something like this. But they called home, did not mention anything, and we cannot see any reason. We have gone through all reasons we can think of, like smuggling and whiskey and anything. But they were in a hurry. They were supposed to be at Saturday morning in Rauma, and they had already ordered harbor workers to 7 in the morning. And no time to go and check out the environment. Maybe this way, that's another possible route. This, by the way, where the Swedes are looking for the U-boat under the submarines outside Stockholm. This is the area. when they look for submarines, which happens occasionally. They're very paranoid about them. And as there is no information, it raises theories. Torpedoes, yeah, Russians, absolutely. And the government, we know all the government. Anyway, we move back to the place here where the black arrow here, where they apparently were observed at late afternoon on Friday. Rödhamn is the name of the place, and according to our logbook entry, which we cannot of course find, the owner is gone. We have no clue where it actually comes from, which is another pain in the whole series of pains we have with this entire project. But late afternoon, spotted there. At this very moment, about it is, the weather is changing. Well, I try to point with this one. You can see here Norway, the west coast of Norway. These are old pictures. Sweden is here, and the red dot is the area we are looking at, where the ship is. And you can see a bit of the Finnish coast here. So we have the 3 Scandinavian countries here filling this picture. Above Lofoten, northwest Norway, a low pressure is forming. On the other hand, above Finland, Estonia, there is a high pressure. At 2 p.m. The next picture is at 8 in the evening and the next day. And you can see that they are pretty close to each other. How many know on which way the wind goes around a high pressure? No? Sorry. High pressure, yeah. No. Clockwise. Yep. Anyone else? This is one thing it is good to know. If you have low pressure, the wind always blows counterclockwise. Yep. If you have a high pressure, it always goes clockwise. Meaning in this case, you get a storm from southwest. This way here and this way here. The wind will go at very hard speed in between. And when the isobar lines are that close to each other, it's going to be very intense. And this is what was forming when they were here at start of the evening. And we must recall it was in late October. So it was already dark, as in the middle of the night. The weather stuff, by the way, here's a way how we mark the wind, because it has changed so many times. It is the red line, meaning it's the trace of a balloon, if you let it out in the air. And then we rescale down the entire picture. I think it was 10 or 100 times. So if you let the balloon here, and there is hard wind from southwest, it will certainly go almost to Russia. So I have scaled it down in order to fit it into the picture. But you can see how the wind changes. The gap here, a gap is always a change of a day. So here's Friday, here is the beginning of Saturday, Sunday starts here, Monday here, and so on. It is relevant for our tracing of the wreckage that was found later. Here is the wind for almost, I think it was, this is for 10 days, from three different weather stations. And you can see how the wind has changed completely, almost daily, which of course makes our tracing afterwards even trickier, but we are happy that we have this weather information. Almost at midnight, Irma was seen. I'll go back a little and show where it is. Here, up in the left-hand corner. Do you see a mouse cursor here? There. And this was a very unpleasant leg, because the wind came very hard in from left all the time. They were observed at 11 p.m. sitting still by another boat, a guy who was coming home seeking for a safe harbor with his trawler. And this appears in the protocol that was made in 1969. But he was quite confused because Irma just stood there with the lights on, but no life seen. Well, maybe nothing strange, but a little bit maybe. Irma, however, managed to go further, and the last observation was up here, where another fisherman was coming home and saw a white light spot in the middle of the night. And that's the last thing we know about the ship. It was at 00:45 o'clock. And we have afterwards been able to trace Irma's only possible route, which is really, really dangerous. For example, this gap where they went through with a big ship is merely big enough to let that ship through, and these waters are full of rocks. This is something nobody would ever do, but if there are extreme conditions like a storm going on the more open sea, and you have women and a small kid on board, you may do choices like this. Or they did it, at least. So there were skilled seamen and managed to get through. I think this open office will crash now when I press right arrow, so I have a second part of it that I will need to start. No, not yet. Wow, maybe the bogus. Irma came through and went towards the destination, but where? We have no idea. Severe storm, almost 30 meters could have been. Wave height is the significant wave height means the average of the biggest third of the waves as seen by an experienced eye. But on the other hand, the so-called monster waves may be something totally different. And in fact, monster waves, they are not really one. They appear all the time because waves can be described as multiple waves with different lengths moving and with different directions. And you understand that if all versions are represented, they will at some point work together. And at an extremely rare point, they may really, really work together. And they create monster waves. These appear all the time, but humans only the biggest, worst waves get media attention. So even if we look at small waves, just here outside, towards Sweden, there are so-called monster waves, but they are in scale to the other ones, they are bigger. But in our eyes, they are all small, nothing to talk about. Anyway, they went into a storm. They had a safe feeling when nearby the covering land. The further out they came, the worse it got. It was a bad decision, but they were young, they needed money, they were in a hurry. I think it may crash now. Let's see. No, okay, so here is a simulation of, this is not the ship, the real ship was much bigger, but this is what I have in Stormwind. This is only to show you that how the deck gets covered with water all the time. When you go along with the waves, it's different when you go against the waves. Then you have the bow of the ship that splits it up and protects the everything from water coming over. And even inside wind, it's better. But when you go along the waves and you are on a wave top, you cannot see anything at all, really. Okay, it's not really much to see, but I'm explaining that when you're on a wave top, okay, I can try to get it again. So. Well, there's a green light. When a ship is on a wave top, it sinks down in the wave to get buoyancy. So it's the worst case when the ship is in a wave bottom and it sinks down. It gets more balance because wider areas of the ship get in touch with water. So the worst case is when you're on top of a wave. Then you need to fall through the wave a bit in order to get lifting force enough. It didn't sink the ship, but what it does is cover the deck. And if you do not have everything in shape on your deck, then you are going to take in water. I have calculated that, with APL of course, that there was the speed difference of the water and the ship and the waves is such that the ship was covered about 1,000 times with a big wave. And if there is a hole somewhere, a badly covered location or some opening, and you let in 100 liters of water each time and do it 1,000 times, you get 100 ton. And this is enough to get the ship, which is already loaded with the cargo from Klaipėda, to be with the deck almost at water level. And when you drive along the waves, you experience a hypnotic movement. It's like slowly down and then a little bit slowly up, and you could almost fall asleep. If there is no light, you don't see what happens. And we believe at the moment that they did not simply understand that the ship is getting heavy. It is sinking slowly. Once there was enough water, it will fill itself quickly. And we have seen, I don't have that picture now with me, but where Irma is at the bottom, there is coal, a coal field around the bow of the ship with maybe 40 meters of diameter. So it has went down with the bow first, and the coal has fallen out of the cargo room and built around arena around the ship. So they went down, and this is Finnish.
Tältä kohdalta tuli puhelinsoitto Meklarille, lauantaina kaikki on hyvin, ja 3 tuntia tämän jälkeen etsinnät ovat keskittyneet siten, että ruotsalaiset alukset ovat ja helikopterireitti sekä muut alukset ovat tässä. 19 radiopuhelu kaikki hyvin on laskelmien mukaan tapahtunut Ahvenanmeren puolivälissä Luotsäädistä itään. Helikopterin tultua mukaan lentotiedusteluun etenkin. Kyllä tämä painaja oli kunnolla väline, joka näillä luotaamattomilla kannattanut suorittaa juuri lumipeitteen vuoksi?
So we did have television in 1968. I wasn't too old, but I was alive, born at that time. Yeah, black and white. So there was rather big media exposure, and at that time there were people in the archipelago, and there was a different kind of spirit than now. So this really moved. It was a moving story, a touchy story. Now, here's what we have, 5,000 square kilometers. You can imagine the ship, okay, 45 meters, 7 meters wide, it's like not much. It is not easy to track. It is very small compared to everything else we have. I did some calculations and it is, yeah, exactly 34.5. Well, you calculate the volume of the needle and then the volume of the haystack, and then you do some trick and that's it. Yes, it will take a lot of time if you have that kind of area. It's too much. 223 days, provided you do 16-hour days. And quite a lot of fuel. We can drive with 4 knots. We can see 100 meters down on the seabed in both directions. With 4 knots and 200 meters, it takes this amount of time and amount of fuel. But what the hell, out and get going. You search by towing, by pulling a so-called fish after you. You can see the cable. It's a side scan sonar allowing you to see the seabed in 2 directions, 100 meters on each side. And it's a fish, it's a kind of a torpedo, 1 meter long, maybe a bit longer. They are better equipment as well, but they are very, very expensive. You can have it in a laptop, and this is what you see, a nice amber color of the seabed shape. You need to have a rather experienced eye in order to see among all details, recognize something that is built by human. So, no, doesn't look good. No scenarios. Out on the open sea, there is no land in any direction. If there is a storm and you get in the water, you have no chance. If there is cold water, it will be annoying for a while. Then the human protection takes place, and actually it feels warm at the end. You have a nice feeling just before going down. So in that sense, it's not too bad, but it's a desperate situation, of course. Searching. We had all the food down below this hatch there, and when he had opened it 10 times and each time forgot something, he started to pray to it. What we had, however, was, and this is the interesting stuff, there was wreckage from the ship found starting from 5 days after the accident. And the accident was night between Friday, Saturday. When they didn't arrive to the harbor Saturday, those who were waiting thought, okay, they are somewhere else, we go home. And also the family members have came there by car. notice that here's nobody while I go home. So it's not like today, you panic when you don't see your friend, that where the hell are you, you call. It was a completely different time scale. If it doesn't happen today, well, I wait a couple of days, that's no panic. So only on Monday did they actually realize that the ship didn't come to the harbor. Weekend is time. So there was a number of days lost already. And of course, it takes time for wreckage. The stuff that comes off the ship when it goes down, like a lifeboat here, a rudder to a lifeboat, a life vest, and so on, went to several different places within a month. Which is interesting because if they all originate from the same location and they go to different locations like this, they must obey some kind of rules. They behave differently. And of course, if you have something very light, like inflated with air, a raft, a big one, it will go with the wind. If you have something that is almost totally in the water, it won't go with the wind, it will go with the surface current. If you have something bigger, extending a bit deeper in the water, it will go both by the surface current and the deeper water currents. And there are combinations of all these. There were objects and there were also oil spotted from an airplane at this location, mentioned in the 50-year-old protocol investigations. And this is the source for our logic, our mathematical solution to the problem. The standard currents between Finland and Sweden are about like this. The water basically goes counterclockwise all the time. And we have, along the Estonian coast, the water is flowing towards east. Along the Finnish coast up here, the water is coming back, flowing west, goes up when it can go up, and comes down along the Swedish coast, goes to Denmark around Bornholm a bit, and comes back along the south coast and the Lithuania, Latvia country and so on. Occasionally there will be places where the water just rotates, and here is one. It goes around as well. And here is one, and there are more locations where there are specific behavior of depending on the nature of the flow. But here's the general directions of the water. A current may be quite hard. It could be, even in a storm, it can be 40 centimeters a second. This much each second out on the open sea. It's nothing compared to the English Channel and the English coast current water movement, but in the Baltic Sea it's pretty much. We have wind affecting an object directly. Blows onto it, it goes with the wind. We have wave effect, the Stokes effect. When the waves build up, and there's gravitation and you have a floating object, gravitation will pull it down and the water will pull it up, and there is a wall elevation, some kind of angle that will keep it with the wave for a while until the wave goes under and the object starts to wait for the next wave. These are, one can model this effect. Also, the waves are delayed. In order to get a wave direction, you need to calculate with 6 hours of the same wind direction. The wave don't change as soon as the wind changes. It takes time it's enormous masses to reorganize. So there's a delay compared to wind effect. Then we have the fixed current, we saw the picture, but we have something called the surface current, which is the top 1 meter layer on the water it moves differently. It's more sensitive to movement and to the wind, but there is an annoying thing called the Coriolis Effect. How many know what Coriolis is? Oh, good, great. I'll explain a little. If you have something moving on the Earth, say you have something at this very direction here, close to the equatorial, and the red vector is the speed vector, the length of the vector is the speed. If you move it north, this object, say it's a part of the water that is there all over. If you move that part of the water towards north, it has a speed along the Earth at the equatorial, and there is a 40,000 kilometer diameter, so it has a speed per, which is rather high. Now, if you move it by some magic trick very close to the North Pole, say for example, I have here 1,500 kilometers an hour speed in order to get around the Earth in 24 hours. If I take that water part and I'm standing at the North Pole exactly, and I put it here next to me and it has a speed of 1,500 kilometers an hour, it will go into spin quite a lot. So it needs to slow down when it goes north. But it doesn't like it. Things that move, they don't want to get disturbed. They like to do as they were doing all time. So it wants to go on with the same effect, with the same speed, of course. So as the surrounding water, the surrounding ground and so on slows down something that moves north, it tries to continue with its speed, but it cannot. Meaning, in practice, when you move it north, it will actually go 30 degrees right. And slowing down at the same time, because of the its mass effect. If you move it, if you don't move the water piece north, you move it east. Say you are at this location here and you take a piece of water and push it with exaggerated speed towards east. You increase its speed compared to the other water around. You have something called the centrifugal force, of course, meaning that when the speed increases, it wants to seek a position closer to the largest diameter of Earth, the equatorial. It will find a new place where it is in balance with gravitation and everything else. That's obvious. If you have something rotating at a huge speed compared to, say, 100 times the airplane speed, it will, by the centrifugal force, go to the equatorial. It will seek the outmost position it is able to have. Meaning, you moved it towards east, but actually it went also south. Again, it turns 30 degree right. And this is one thing you can. It's an interesting effect, but and it affects our daily life all time. Check it in Wikipedia. We take that into account. We show you now, hopefully, a short glance of the software. I press escape here. There. I won't show you any code. We have focused on a few of the items, the wreckage we found. We took a life raft, a half lifeboat, the oil spill, and the wooden hatch cover elements, which are 4 meter long wooden, this thick and half-meter wide pieces of wood that they had to cover the openings to the cargo. Those few were found within five days to 2 weeks after the accident. Well, 5 days to 3 weeks, I think. What we tried to do is, and the end positions are these white rings here, maybe you can see them. We want to try to drop an object in the water, or several objects in the water at the location, so that they all, depending on their characteristics, float around to the location where they were found. But they have very different behavior. The wind changes almost every day. The wave sizes change as they get further away, for example, from the Åland Islands. They come out on more open sea and experience higher waves. It's a very, very complex equation of details that we try to solve. We cannot go backwards and start at the location where an item was found, because we do not know how many days it was there before it was found. So if you go forward, we can conclude that it hits a place and stops. Say it has 5 days time to go to. It was found 5 days after the accident, which we know, by the way, was 3 o'clock, because one of the crew members had a clock watch which was not waterproof, and it had stopped at 3 o'clock in the night. So the method used here is to go forward, try all places, drop a number of objects at every possible place, do a calculation and see, do they all go as we want them to go, or do they go elsewhere? This is, however, a rather complex calculation, because we have to, in between each iteration, we need to recalculate wave sizes, the directions, and blah, 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 so it's rather heavy. And hence we do it in the GPU. And here's the result. It's not the last one, but it is one. For example, we can see here that those possible places to drop oil in the water so that it can be found when it was found, seen from the airplane a number of days later. Those possible areas where you can do that are the yellow locations. If you, for example, drop oil, I need to select the oil spill here first. There. Here. It will go this way. It will first go, as the wind changed to north, it took time before the effects happened. It will go the oil spill would go south turn up, go northeast, and then come down again and hit the location where it was seen. For the lifeboat, it's more tricky. I select that one. If I try here with a place on the green area, we can see that it actually, the entire path ends up here, where the boat was found. If I try another place, like here, here's the movement for, I think it was about 2 weeks, and it ends up on a place where it was not found. So it's not, we are not interested in that, where the mouse cursor is here. That location is apparently not the place you want to look for Irma. And now I'll continue with the this one. And I was somewhere. Well, I was about here. We got the common spot, a pretty tight one, considering the information we had about the wreckage. At that time, those times, they were hugely inaccurate. They didn't have a cell phone, you know, take a picture of the things you find. No. And not to mention things like writing down accurate timestamps or on which side of the island it is. If the island is 5 kilometers wide, it has a small meaning. At least for me it would have. So the source data is not too accurate, but nevertheless we were able to find one common area where all these conditions are fulfilled, except the lifeboat one, but all the others. This is how it looks like when you search for a search on the sea bottom. There's 200 meters between the lines. These are waypoints. Here we have seen something interesting on the sea bottom and made a turn back and went over it again. No, it was maybe nothing. A little bit about the GPU. There are some persons here doing work with that. The method we use here I can mention shortly, that we have 2 textures. Each one is, say, 4 million pixels, 2000 by 2000. In each pixel, you can actually program a small calculation which is identical for all pixels. When you then want, and you call that calculation in parallel, the hardware takes care of that the same calculation is executed on all 4 million pixels. Not in any specific time. This is gaming hardware, so it's very efficient. But it's guaranteed that it will be executed. And you execute a small time step of something. Then, in order to get it into a thing that advances in time, you add 1 minute. You take a 1 minute increment and do the calculation on the opposite surface using the previous as a result. And you do it. Then you again switch back and calculate here and use the result on this one as argument. So you get an accumulation. Then you can ping pong between these 2 surfaces for, say, 1000 times with 10 seconds in between, and always get a small step ahead. This way we do it. We control it from APL, but we let the pixels produce the result in parallel. And it's not maybe the speed, it is fast, but it's also a way for me to manage. I know these things, so it's actually quite easy for me to keep it in hands this way. Anyway, it's a more deeper discussion. Yes, we did find it. This is how it looks on the sonar. 43 meters depth. And the thing I'm a bit proud of is that it was only a bit more than 5,000 meters between the calculated position with the APL GPU stuff here and the actual location of Irma. I wrote it as fishes because I wanted to hide it a bit. Because there are many curious people and we don't want to. I mean, it is the correct position, it's not hidden any longer, but when I made this chart, the media started to call us and wanted to see maps of where is it we want to publish. And so I had another position which is now away from here, but the real position is the one I wrote fishes. And then I also called one member of the team that wasn't with us when we found it and told him, hey, go and watch the map, how about go fishing? And he wrote back a smiley to me shortly after. Anyway, it was a good hit with a completely new method of approaching a real-life problem. No beautiful coding, it's more like modeling and trial error and see what happens, but it's also about crunching numbers and getting answers to things you cannot, absolutely not solve without a computer. Here are some pictures. It says Irma. Borgo is the city, 50 kilometers to east from Helsinki. It's a home city. Our divers have been down there. All old ships kind of look like this. They get green and starts to grow all kind of underwater stuff. That's what's left of the steering wheel. The entire top construction on the top deck was wooden, and it's no longer there. There has been trawlers, fish nets, passing over and taking stuff along part of the steering wheel, for example. But it's kind of beautiful. Only things made of metal are still left. There's a propeller in perfect condition. The owners of the ship was thinking about, it's a 1 meter Kameva propeller with turning blades. It's a good one. More than 1 meter, it's bigger, yeah, 1.5 meter maybe. But it would be nice to get it off, of course. But it's a project, not easy. Here we are. Smiling guys. And we had a good reason to. This picture went out all over the places. We were mentioned in, I think, 20 different newspapers over the closest days because of the nature of the Irma story and how well it is known in Finnish history. Kind of disappointing on the other hand, a little bit like cheating. It was where I wanted it to be, and it was a bit unfair. What do I do now? It's life after, but I will find other things to do. It was fun. I hope people wondering what can you do with APL. I couldn't have done this with any C# C or anything else. It was building all the flow for the system. In APL, I just took it, typed in a little and developed it and got solutions. So it's a perfect way to utilize our language. Questions?